The Michigan State Senate is not scheduled to formally meet until late August, but Governor Snyder and his bipartisan coalition are hoping that everyone will be back in the Capitol tomorrow to vote on the proposed Medicaid expansion bill. ABC 10's Rick Tarsitano breaks down how it works and who it might affect.
This is going to take a little while.
When President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law on March 23, 2010, he envisioned Medicaid expansion as a mandatory measure. But while the U.S. Supreme Court backed nearly every aspect of the bill in 2012, they left the mandated implementation up to the states.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of final passage of House Bill.
The Michigan House of Representatives favored the expansion to more than 470,000 low-income residents in the state, passing House Bill 4714 by a tally of 76 to 31 on June 13th. The Senate then declined to call a vote on the proposition.
We're talking about 500,000 people in the state of Michigan that you're about to turn your backs on and go home on a vacation.
Republicans in both the House and Senate are still split on how to move forward with the statute.
I don't think it's really an issue overall of whether reform or expansion is a good or bad thing. There's a small group of that population in the legislature that's concerned that the federal government either won't live up to its promise or doesn't have the capacity at the point where it starts ratcheting down. Right now, the federal government's 100% on board, and they're responsible for 100% of the funding. At some point in time, 4 or 5 years down the road, it starts trickling back, and it eventually will trickle to they'll only take 90% of that financial liability.
But the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary, Kathleen Sebelius, has said more than once that if any state can't afford the 10% they are obligated to pay 3 years from now, her department will adjust the coverages. Legislators have been tinkering with ways to pay for the program if, in fact, the state does end up having to carry the financial load.
What they're looking at is incentives for, let's say, non-smoking or reduction in weight, healthier lifestyles, things like that. So there have been a million little concepts that have been back and forth of whether to, let's say, have a premium, and then we give all those credits if they maintain those 5 or 6 things in the first 6 months. So it's basically a paper wash, or we're going to actually charge them.
But they might not have the money, considering the expansion would go to adults making 133% of the poverty level. In other words, the 14,000 to 16,000 UP residents who make less than $15,000 a year.
These are the folks that are, out there working maybe 1 or 2 or 3 part-time jobs, or they're at a very entry-level job, and so their ability to pay for some of that additional insurance is just not there. So you can see why they don't have health insurance, because it would almost eat up all of that just to provide that by the time they got their salary, paid taxes, rent. There's no money left over. And if they have an issue, it does end up at the emergency room, which is probably the most expensive form of coverage that you can get.
Only time will tell, but if the bill passes, 320,000 Michigan residents could then enroll in Medicaid for the 2014 fiscal year beginning October 1st. Reporting for ABC 10 and CW5, I'm Rick Tarsitano.